June 5, 1967. 30,000 feet over the Gulf of Tonkin. Inside the cockpit of an F-4C Phantom II, callsign Rhino 1, Captain Jack Ripper Collins feels invincible. He is strapped to a 20-ton monster, a machine that is less an airplane and more a monument to American industrial might. The Phantom is a brute. It's a two-seat, twin-engine, Mach 2 interceptor powered by two J-79 engines that burn a river of fuel and leave a thick, black, telltale smoke trail across the sky. It is the most advanced, powerful, and expensive fighter in the world. In the back seat, his radar intercept officer, callsign Bear, is hunched over a glowing green radar scope. His job is to find the enemy from miles away. Rhino 1, this is Red Crown. The voice from the U.S. Navy control ship crackles in their helmets. Vector 290, you are feet dry. Welcome to the party. They cross the coast of North Vietnam. Below them, the jungle is a sea of green. Their target area today, MiG Ridge, the notorious stretch of sky near Hanoi. This is the war. And to the U.S. Navy and Air Force pilots in 1967, the enemy is a joke. Their primary opponent is the Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-21, or fishbed. To the Phantom crews, it is a relic. It's a tiny, single-engine silver pencil, a 1950s-era interceptor that looks like something out of a previous war. It is small, it is simple, and it is, they believe, hopelessly obsolete. The F-4 Phantom was not designed for a dogfight. It was a high-tech missile truck, a product of the Cold War, designed to fly at 50,000 feet and shoot down massive, non-maneuvering Soviet bombers with long-range radar-guided missiles. In fact, in their infinite wisdom, the engineers at McDonnell Douglas had designed the F-4 without an internal cannon. A gun, they argued, was a primitive, useless weapon in the new age of missile combat. The American pilots, bristling with Sparrow and Sidewinder missiles, saw their mission as pest control. They were flying a high-tech sledgehammer to swat a gnat. "Bear, you got anything?" Collins asks, his voice a calm, confident drawl. "Negative, Rhino. Scope is clean. These guys must be sleeping." Collins laughs. "They're probably out of fuel. I hear those tin cans can only stay up for 20 minutes. This mockery was standard. The Americans had all the advantages. They had superior speed, they had superior climb, and they had superior long-range radar that was, on paper, a generation ahead of anything the North Vietnamese possessed. What the F-4 pilots did not understand was that they were not fighting the MiG-21. They were fighting the man in the bunker. Simultaneously, a concrete bunker near Hanoi. In a dark, smoke-filled room, a 30-year-old Vietnamese controller, his face lit by a dim, flickering radar screen, watches the American Phantoms approach. He is a GCI operator, Ground Control Intercept. He sees the F-4s. He sees their altitude, their speed, and their heading. He also sees his own aircraft, the antique MiG-21s, flying low, their radars off, totally invisible. The Vietnamese controllers were not engaging in a 1v1 duel. They were playing a three-dimensional chess game. They were using the Phantom's own strengths, their speed, and their reliance on radar against them. The GCI controller picks up his radio. He speaks calmly to his pilot, callsign Dragon 2. Dragon 2, this is Hanoi. You have two targets, 30 kilometers, heading south at 10,000 meters. They are heavy. They do not see you. The Vietnamese pilot, flying a tiny MiG-21, clicks his radio twice. He is a silent, unseen scalpel. He is being vectored, perfectly, by the man in the bunker, into a position where the Phantom's high-tech missiles are completely useless, directly behind it. Back in the F-4 Phantom, Rhino won. "Bear, I got a flash," the radar intercept officer suddenly calls out. "Radar contact, single bogey, 20 miles, 5 o'clock low." Colin's heart leaps. Finally, a little action. He banks the heavy Phantom, its black smoke trail painting a giant X on the sky, a perfect advertisement of its location. "All right, Bear, let's lock him up. Let's see if this antique wants to dance." But the radar contact is weak. "He's low, Rhino. He's down in the mud. Damn it, I lost him. The ground clutter is too heavy." "Just a gnat," Collins scoffs, leveling the plane. "He's probably running for home." Over MiG Ridge, 30,000 feet. Captain Ripper Collins continues his patrol. He is flying a racetrack pattern, long, straight legs that make him predictable. He is a battleship, confident in his long-range guns. He is completely unaware that a submarine is already inside his sonar bubble. The RIO, Bear, stares at his scope. The blip that vanished is still gone. The problem with the Phantom's radar was its design. It was a powerful, forward-looking cone designed to find bombers in the sky. It was utterly blind to anything below it or behind it. It was a flashlight in a dark room, and the killer was standing just over his shoulder. Down below, the MiG-21 pilot, Dragon 2, is a ghost. He is flying visually, his radar off, his eyes locked on the thick, black smoke trail of the F-4 above him. The American brute was broadcasting its exact location to every enemy pilot within 50 miles. The GCI controller's voice comes again, calm and precise. "Dragon 2, target is now 10 kilometers, still unaware. Climb now. Your solution is good. He is yours." The MiG-21, a featherweight compared to the Phantom, rockets upward. It's a point defense interceptor, a rocket with wings, and it climbs at a rate that stuns the American pilots. "Rhino, I got a fast mover," the RIO suddenly screams. The MiG has climbed high enough to appear on his scope. 6 o'clock, low. He's climbing fast. Collins' blood runs cold. 6 o'clock is the one place he cannot be. He cannot see. He cannot shoot. Damn it! Where is he? He yanks the 20-ton Phantom into a hard, banking turn, the G-forces pressing him into his seat. The plane shudders, its heavy missile-laden wings fighting the air. "I don't see him. Bear, where is he?" "He's in the clutter. He's gone. He vanished again." The MiG-21 pilot, anticipating the turn, had rolled inside it, a maneuver so tight that the heavy F-4 couldn't possibly follow it. He has just done the impossible. He has gained the angle. He is now 2,000 feet behind the Phantom, and he is closing. "I have visual. I have tone," the MiG pilot calls out, his voice finally electric. He has an atoll heat-seeking missile locked onto the Phantom's twin J-79 engines, 2 massive, perfect targets. Fox 2, a small white atoll missile, leaps from the MiG's wing. In the F-4 cockpit, a high-pitched screech fills their helmets. The missile launch warning. "Missile! Missile!" the RIO shrieks. "Brake right! Brake!" Collins slams the stick, pulling the Phantom into a gut-wrenching 6G turn. Chaff! Flares! Now! The Phantom bleeds energy, its speed dropping catastrophically as it tries to escape. The missile, fooled by the flares, explodes harmlessly 1,000 feet behind them. Collins is now breathing hard. Good save, Bear. Where is he? Did we lose him? I think so. Scope is clean. I think he's still here, Collins screams. His cockpit canopy is suddenly filled with the silver pencil shape of the antique MiG-21. It has just vanished from their radar, accelerated to Mach 1, and reappeared not with a missile, but with guns. The MiG-21 pilot, seeing his missile fail, had kept flying, closing a gap the Americans thought was impossible. He is now 500 feet away, sitting just off the Phantom's left wing, a place the Americans call the control zone. The mockery is over. The high-tech missile truck, now slow and out of energy, has just been cornered by a knife fighter. The F-4 pilot, Ripper Collins, does the only thing he can. He reaches for the trigger to fire his own cannon, and his hand finds nothing. The Phantom has no gun. The MiG-21 pilot, on the other hand, has a 23mm twin-barrel cannon. He stabilizes, takes aim at the Phantom's massive wing, and squeezes the trigger. Barap! A stream of high-explosive 23mm cannon shells, bright as tracers, rips into the Phantom's right wing. The invincible Phantom shudders violently. A fuel fire warning light explodes on Collins' dashboard. We're hit! We're hit! Engine 1 is on fire! The antique MiG-21, its job done, rolls lazily away, its pilot's face unseen, and dives back toward the jungle, vanishing once more. Collins is now fighting a losing battle. The F-4 is in an uncontrolled spin, trailing a massive plume of fire and black smoke. Bear, we're going in. Eject! 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 2 seconds later, 2 parachutes blossom against the green jungle far below. The $2 million high-tech F-4 Phantom, the pride of the U.S. Navy, wheel carts into a mountain. It has just been swatted by the Gnat.
June 5th, 1967. A jungle clearing, North Vietnam. Captain Ripper Collins lands hard, his parachute snagging in a tree. He is alive, but he is a prisoner of war. As he is marched away, his mind is not on his capture. It is replaying the last 30 seconds of the fight. The antique had appeared from nowhere. It had dodged his flares. It had close to a distance inside his missile's minimum range, and then it had used a gun. He, an elite American naval aviator, had been shot down by a 1950s cannon, a weapon his own F-4 didn't even carry. The humiliation was absolute. The mockery had been lethally reversed. He was not the first, and he would not be the last. Aboard the USS Constellation, the Carrier Air Wing Command Center. The reports are coming in from multiple squadrons. It is a bloodbath. Bandit 1 is down. Repeat, we have lost Bandit 1. Ejection, 2 good shoots. Showtime 4 is feet wet, but he is code 3, heavy damage. His reporting cannon hits. Rhino 1 is lost, no contact. Last transmission was missile launch. The admirals and commanders in the war room are staring at the map. Their kill ratios, which were supposed to be 10-1 in their favor, are collapsing. In many engagements, they are 2-1 or worse. The F-4 Phantom, the high-tech sledgehammer, is being systematically dismantled. The mockery in the briefing room stops. It is replaced by a cold, terrified confusion. How is this happening? They analyze the after-action reports. A horrifying pattern emerges. First, the enemy was not who they thought. The primary adversary was not the MiG pilot. It was the man in the bunker, the GCI controller. The Vietnamese were not engaging in 1v1 dogfights. They were running a sophisticated ground-based ambush system. The GCI would paint the F-4s with long-range radar, vectors the American RIOs would often dismiss as searching. The GCI would then guide their own MiGs, flying low and in the clutter, completely unseen. They would guide them into the F-4's 6 o'clock blind spot. Only then would the MiG pilot turn on his own radar, get a tone, and fire his heat-seeking atoll missile, all before the American crew even knew he was there. The second, more humiliating realization was that the American sledgehammer was full of flaws. The F-4's massive J-79 engines, while powerful, produced a thick, greasy, black smoke trail that could be seen for 30 miles. To the MiG pilots, it was a giant "kick-me" sign painted in the sky. The Spider and Sidewinder missiles, designed to kill Soviet bombers, were disastrous in a close-range, high-G knife fight. They couldn't get a lock. They had minimum range limitations. They were easily spoofed by a hard banking turn. And finally, the most critical flaw of all, the lack of a gun. Time and time again, F-4 pilots would maneuver perfectly, getting onto a MiG's tail, only to find themselves in the control zone with nothing to shoot. They were lions that had been declawed by their own designers. The antique MiG-21 was a purebred dogfighter. It was smaller, lighter, and could turn on a dime, bleeding energy from the heavy F-4. And it always had a cannon. The brute was being outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and outfought. The core emotion of the air war had changed from arrogance to humiliation. Superior technology was failing, catastrophically, because it was the wrong tool for the wrong war being used by pilots trained for the wrong mission. The admirals in the U.S. Navy looked at the staggering loss rates and came to a stunning conclusion. The problem wasn't just the plane. The problem was the pilots. They had trained a generation of missile interceptor operators, not dogfighters. They had forgotten the lessons of World War II and Korea. They had believed their own technology. The mockery was over. The classroom was about to open.
March 3, 1968. Naval Air Station, Miramar, California. The fallout from the disastrous air war over Vietnam was immediate. The Navy's admirals, facing a PR nightmare and a mounting pile of coffins, authorized one of the most radical and initially secret programs in military history. It was not a new plane. It was not a new missile. It was a school. They called it the United States Navy Fighter Weapons School. The pilots would call it Topgun. The Navy had tasked a brilliant 38-year-old F-4 pilot named Captain Frank Alt to figure out why they were losing. His report, the Alt Report, was a brutal 480-page indictment of the Navy's entire philosophy. It confirmed every pilot's worst fears. The missiles were failing. The technology was unreliable. But the biggest failure? The arrogance. The Navy had trained its pilots to be bomber interceptor operators, not aerial killers. They had forgotten the art of the dogfight. Alt's recommendation was simple, revolutionary, and deeply humiliating for the high-tech Navy. They needed to learn how to fight again from scratch. A handful of the Navy's best, most aggressive F-4 pilots were hand-picked and sent to a ramshackle trailer in the Miramar Desert. Their new instructors were not admirals. They were the enemy. Well, sort of. To simulate the small, nimble MiG-21, the new Topgun instructors would fly the Douglas A-4 Skyhawk. It was a tiny, subsonic, low-tech attack plane, a Gnat just like the MiG. The first F-4 students, all combat-hardened veterans, would arrive, still filled with the arrogance of the F-4 brute.
All right, a Top Gun instructor, a pilot with 100 missions over Hanoi would brief them. The name of the game is dissimilar air combat training. You are in the F-4. I am in the A-4. Your job is to kill me. The F-4 pilots would laugh. You're in that? This'll take 30 seconds. The engagement would begin. The F-4 would rocket forward, a 20-ton monster trying to get a missile lock. The A-4, the MiG simulator, would simply turn. It would turn inside the F-4's massive turning circle. The F-4 pilot, pulling 6 Gs, his airframe shuddering, would look over his shoulder and see the A-4 effortlessly already on his 6 o'clock. Guns, guns, guns. The instructor's calm voice would crackle over the radio. You're dead. For the first time, the F-4 pilots were fighting a plane that showed them exactly what the MiG-21s had been doing to them. They were being humiliated, safely, over the California desert. The Top Gun instructors tore up the SAC playbook. They taught the pilots to forget their high-tech radar and use their eyes. They taught them to anticipate the turn, to manage their energy, to understand that the brute F-4 could, if flown perfectly, be a dogfighter. They learned that the F-4's power was not for speed, but for the vertical. They learned to climb, using their 2 massive engines to go up where the MiG-21 couldn't follow, and then crashing down, like a hawk, on their target. The mockery was reversed. The American pilots, once humbled by the antique MiG, were now humbling themselves by learning from the antique A-4. The arrogance was being systematically beaten out of them, one training flight at a time.
August 1970, USS Midway, Gulf of Tonkin. 2 years had passed. The Top Gun graduates were now back in the fleet, and they were not students anymore. They were killers. The briefing rooms, once filled with arrogant mockery, were now sterile, professional, and deadly serious. The pilots were no longer missile operators. They were hunters. They knew the MiG-21's turn radius. They knew its acceleration. They knew the GCI controller's playbook. The humiliation in the desert had forged a new, smarter, and far more lethal American aviator. But something else had changed. The pilots, after years of screaming at their commanders, had finally gotten their wish. A new version of the Phantom was rolling off the production lines. The F-4E. It was still a brute.
It still had its two massive, smoky engines, but it now had something new, something revolutionary that was in fact ancient. It had an internal 20mm M61 Vulcan cannon mounted in the nose. The missile truck had finally grown claws. The F-4E, flown by Topgun-trained pilots, was a completely different animal. The air war over Hanoi was about to be reset. Operation Linebacker 1972, The Skies over Hanoi. A flight of F-4E Phantoms, call sign Wolfpack, is escorting a bomber strike. Wolf 1, I got them, the Rio, a new Top Gun graduate calls out. 2 bogeys, 7 o'clock low, they're climbing, standard GCI ambush. I see them, the pilot, Wolf 1, replies. His voice is cold. Let them come, let them get close. This was the new doctrine. They were no longer running from the MiGs, they were baiting them. The 2 MiG-21s, Dragon 1 and Dragon 2, see the heavy F-4s, their smoke trails painting the sky. They see an easy kill. The GCI controller vectors them in. Go now, they are unaware. The 2 MiGs rocket upward, climbing for the Phantom 6 o'clock. Okay, Wolf 2, the American flight lead says, brake hard, now. The 2 F-4s do something the Vietnamese pilots had never seen. Instead of running, they split, one going high, one going low. A vertical scissors maneuver taught at Top Gun. The MiGs forced to choose are confused. Their ground controller is screaming. Where did they go? They've broken the script. Dragon 1, the lead MiG pilot, locks on to the lower F-4 and fires his ATOL missile. Missile, missile, the Rio calls out. I see it, the F-4 pilot says. He pulls his F-4E into a brutal high-G barrel roll, managing his energy exactly as he was taught, and the ATOL missile, unable to follow, flies harmlessly past. But the maneuver was a trap. The other F-4, Wolf 1, who had gone vertical, is now high above the fight. He rolls his heavy Phantom over, points its nose straight down, and dives, a 20-ton hawk. I've got the trailer, Wolf 1 says, his voice ice. He's all mine. The MiG-21 pilot, Dragon 2, has no idea. He is still trying to find the first F-4. He is in a target-rich, data-poor environment. Wolf 1 closes to 2,000 feet. He is too close for a missile. In 1967, this would have been a moment of failure. In 1972, it was a moment of victory. Wolf 1 switches from missile to gun. A new angry red gun light illuminates his HUD. He stabilizes, puts the pipper, the targeting dot, just in front of the banking MiG, and squeezes the trigger. Brap! The Vulcan cannon, a 6-barrel Gatling gun, erupts, firing 6,000 rounds per minute. A stream of 20mm shells, a flying buzzsaw, hits the antique MiG-21. The MiG does not burn, it simply disintegrates. A wing rips off, the cockpit shatters, the silver pencil is gone. Splash 1, Wolf 1 yells. Wolf 2, your turn. The lead MiG, Dragon 1, seeing his wingman explode, panics. He brakes hard, trying to escape, but the F-4 he was chasing, Wolf 2, has also learned the new rules. He has managed his energy. He cuts the corner, gets a solid lock. Fox 2, a new Sidewinder, the L model, designed for high-G dogfights, leaps from the Phantom's wing. It does not miss. The second MiG-21 explodes. The entire engagement, from the ambush to 2 kills, has taken 45 seconds. The mockery, started 5 years earlier, has been fully and violently reversed. The brute had learned how to fight. The gnat was now the one being swatted.
1973. Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. The air war over Vietnam is over. The Paris Peace Accords are signed. But the lessons, paid for in blood and humiliation, are just beginning. The U.S. Navy's kill ratio, which had plummeted to a disastrous 2-to-1 in 1967, had soared to a staggering 12.5-to-1 by 1972. The reason? Top Gun. The pilots who had been retrained in the art of the dogfight were now untouchable. The U.S. Air Force, which had not adopted a similar dissimilar combat training program, saw its kill ratio remain stagnant and, in some cases, worsen. They had relied on the technology, on the new E-model Phantom with its gun, but had not retrained the men. The evidence was undeniable. The lesson was brutal. This is the core emotion. This is the why. The F-4 Phantom was one of the most successful, powerful, and iconic fighters ever built. But it was a brute. It was a sledgehammer, a high-tech tool of raw, superior power. The American commanders, blinded by its technological promise, had mocked the antique MiG-21. They had laughed at the Gnat. What they failed to understand was that a sledgehammer is useless in a knife fight. The Vietnamese pilots, with their obscure MiGs, had refused to fight the Americans' war. They did not engage in high-altitude missile duels. They did not turn on their radars. They did not fight honorably. Instead, guided by the brilliant tactics of their GCI controllers, they became invisible. They used their small, antique planes to get in close, to vanish from radar, and to appear on the Phantom's tail, a place where all the technology in the world meant nothing. They had used superior tactics and superior skill to defeat superior power. The air war was not won by the F-4E. It was not won by the gun. It was won ultimately by the humble instructors in the California desert who had retaught the American pilots a simple, ancient truth. It is not the machine, but the man inside it. The mockery of the antique MiG-21 was silenced. The pilots who had laughed at it in 1967 were now, in 1973, sitting in classrooms, desperately studying its every move. The brute had been forced to learn from the gnat. And in doing so, the illusion of technological invincibility was shattered forever. Raw power is not enough. Technology is not enough. In the end, the sky belongs to the pilot who understands the knife fight.